Hey everybody, we are back. Wow, we switched gears on you. We've been doing nothing but fast, stupid fast, supercharged, crazy stuff. And we ran into a situation with this bike that I wanted to take the time to create a tech talk, because when I looked for information on the problem that it had, there really wasn't much internet search or on YouTube. So well, I figured why not? Just go ahead and fix it, spend the time to show exactly what happens, so if you have a problem, you'll be able to do it also. But first, what is this? Well, I just rode it here from my shop at home where I did the repairs, took a nice long ride on it. Thing is purring like a kitten. What this is, this was a project bike that we did, and really, so the whole idea was to have a team building exercise, because we were starting to come out with some Harley-Davidson parts, swing arms, triple clamps, things of that nature, and it became very clear to me that our staff that knows nothing about Harleys and plenty about sport bikes really didn't understand what I was talking about. So I went to a friend of mine, Pipes, thank you. He just happened to have a Dyna laying around in his garage that he didn't need, and we decided to grab it. And I gave him a deadline. Hey guys, we're gonna bring this thing to Sturgis. You've got 3 months to turn I won't call it a basket case. It wasn't a basket case, but it certainly wasn't cool. The rules were very simple. We call this bike Millennial Blue because one of the first things that I decided was no one in the organization over the age of 35 was allowed to give any input. I don't really count. I mean, I give engineering input, but when it comes to assembling, putting this together, I had nothing to do with it other than creating the initial products that they used. So that was basically hard, fast rule number one. Rule number two was everyone in the company got to put something into the project, their idea, whether it be the overall color, the decision to make it a single seater with no rear foot pegs, even the pinstriping on the tank. I think you can see that was chosen by a young lady and beautifully put on by Shane Six, a local madman who does a phenomenal job. So what I wanted to do before I get into the repair I just finished on this thing, I thought I would just sort of walk around it and let you know what we've got. I know we flashed up some pictures of what it looked like before, so I'm going to tell you what it took to make this after. So obviously, right off the bat, you're going to look at this thing and go, wow, that's some really cool colors. This is not paint, and I can't emphasize this enough. If you need anything powder coated, we work with a gentleman very closely, Shane, at Viking Powder Coatings in Eaton, Ohio. We'll give you his contact info. Not only does he do an amazing job when it comes to laying down the powder coat, but this is really important, and anyone who's ever got anything plated, coated, painted, whatever, he's also smart enough to understand what needs to be plated and what doesn't. He doesn't fill up all the holes with powder coat and then make it your job to run a tap through them. The dude is sharp. He does a phenomenal job. This is just one example of what he did. Now listen, because somebody else did this project and I didn't do it, I'm going to get some things wrong, and there are certain things about this bike I don't know. So we're going to put the full build sheet. We'll put a link to the build sheet in the long description so you can go see everything that's on the bike and where we got it done. Now, when you look at this bike, you say, wow, that thing looks cool. Well, what about this dent? All right, so usually I'll bring this bike, and this bike has actually won. It didn't win, but it got top 5 at the FXR Dyna Mixer in Sturgis. Did great. Every time everybody sees the dent in the tank, they go, oh man, what happened? What happened? And I tell them, I don't know, it was like that when we painted it. Well, why would you paint it that way? Sorry, when we powder coated it. Because what a lot of people don't realize is when you powder something, you have to first glass bead it, surface prep, whatever all they use in that. But then it has to go into an oven. So a dent like this, where you would ordinarily throw a little body filler in it, you throw some body filler in it, you powder coat it real nice, put it in the oven, guess what? shit melts out, looks like crap. So we didn't have enough time to get it done correctly. So they made the decision, because we had a deadline. This bike was going to Sturgis, whether it was finished or not, and I didn't care how long they had to stay up, wait. I didn't care how much they had to work. I gave them a task, please get the task done, and they did. It was phenomenal, it really was. But anyway, they decided not to just leave that. I have a friend who does paintless dent removal, and one of these days when I have a bunch of spare time, I'm gonna take that over to him, he'll pop it out, and you'll never know it's done. So anyway, that's the look. Obviously, we have a Corbin saddle on here. We work very close with Mike and the folks at Corbin. Come up with a really, really nice, I think basically they call this carbon fiber and asphalt. It looks cool, rides nice. This thing is very comfortable. So let's just start from the beginning and go back. So the first thing you see are upside down front forks. Well, everybody knows upside down front forks cost a fortune, right? You go look at them, wow, those are really, really expensive. You drop $4 grand, $5 grand on a really good set of Owens forks. These are off of a Gen 2, that's a 2008 through 2012 Hayabusa. The reason we use those is because they're very readily available. We bought these off of eBay for about $350. So how do you put Hayabusa forks on a Dyna? Well, here at Brock's Performance, we made top clamps just for doing that, or triple clamps, I should say. So basically this part is Harley Davidson, mounting the bars, Harley, Harley, Harley. This part is Gen 2 Busa. So basically you put the top clamps on, you have Busa forks, wheel, everything, slide it up in there, you're ready to go. Now, you can see here there's an edge. We actually make a couple different sizes because the Hayabusa forks are considerably shorter than a Dyna fork. If you want this thing dragging the ground with that real long low look, you don't have to run the spacers. We run the spacers. We wanted to get this thing up off the ground a little bit and take advantage of its newfound handling capabilities. So basically what we've got, these come in just regular aluminum. Typical, the Hayabusa forks are more of a goldish color depending on exactly which year. Yet again, Shane, he powder coated them, knocked it out of the park. Most people think they're chrome, it just looks beautiful. We went ahead and put some T-bars on there. I'm not exactly sure where they came from. These mirrors, these are like eBay for $13 or something, but they look cool. That's all that really matters. Moving back to the engine was already chromed up real nice. Didn't have much of an air cleaner on there, so what we did, we talked to our friends at Sprint Filter. We put on a Sprint Filter waterproof. This is the P037 waterproof filter. Now, what's the big deal? Well, if you've ever been in a drowning rainstorm and wonder why the bikes are pulled over on the side of the road, if they're under a bridge, they probably did it on purpose. If they're not under a bridge, they probably sucked a bunch of water in their bike and it quit running. The beauty of the Sprint filter is, on a lot of the other filters, you have to have, they call it a sock. You got to figure out someplace to carry the sock. Only when it's raining, you put it on so your bike doesn't drown, you can get home. Then you take it out, shake it out, put it in your pocket, lose it. None of that needs to go on with the Sprint filter. This thing, it's water resistant. The bike will stay running. We've done tests. I've stuck a garden hose on it. Bike keeps on idling. But anyway, and you know, this little setup, we got an S&S intake here that we run. It looks real good. We don't make Dyna exhaust, right? I don't want to make Dyna exhaust. We're really good at what we do, and I want to keep it that way. So I got with my buddy Nick Trask. I'm like, Nick, you know, the stuff you got looks real good these days. So we put a Trask exhaust on there. Looks good, sounds good. I'll fire it up here in a minute. But that looks really nice. Shane powder coated the battery box. He also powder coated our swing arm. Now the swing arm is really, there's two things going on with the swing arm. Not only are the Dyna swing arms heavy, they're also, and the same thing, the more you can reduce that weight, the easier your shocks can control the bike over bumps and things. But also the way we designed it, the width. So the front part of the swing arm fits the Dyna. The rear part of the swing arm, we went ahead and made so that if you wanted to use sport bike wheels, that they'll fit and you'll have enough room. So if you look, this bike actually has ZX14 wheels. Now at one point they were just that sort of cast gray ugly. Yet again, Shane turned them into these beautiful black powder coated cool looking wheels. They have sole apparently. You can put a set of Busa wheels on there too, but they're typically like 3 or 5 spoke. Nobody liked them, so no, they decided not to run them. Well, all we had to do here, so like I said, Busa forks. We got Busa forks and brakes for about $350. We got the wheels and rotors for about $350 also. So when you think about it, this is a really cool, inexpensive build. Now we did have to space the ZX14 wheels out a little bit. We offer spacers if you want to do that. But the thing that's really nice about this, so you got the ZX14 front, but you've also got the ZX14 rear. So that lets you run a nice, we run the, what's this particular one? The Michelin Pilot Road 4 GTs. That's a 180 wide tire on a 6-inch wide rim. It's close in here, but we've got clearance on this 2005. So you get a really, not only do you get a real nice contact patch, but you can also put, these tires are more for your sport cruisers, you know, your ZX14s, your H2SXs. The way we did our triple clamps, we changed the rake to allow the 17-inch front wheel. So now you take a bike that typically, if you try and find a 19-inch actual honest-to-God performance tire, good luck. They're just not out there. 17 and 17, man, they're everywhere. So it really makes it easier for your tire size. So how do we fit this in? Obviously, we had to center up the wheel in the fender, and then deal with the offset of the chain. Now this used to be a belt drive bike. We converted it over. Now it's got a 530 chain to match those sprockets. And then we had to use a PBI offset front sprocket. Don't hold me to this, but I want to say it was a 1-inch 60 thousandths offset. Like I said, we'll give you all that information. But that'll let everything line up real nice. We got the wheels fit in there. Brock's Performance shocks. We don't actually offer these anymore. We've switched over to the Batubo brand, but we've got the Batubo brand that works actually better than these. Even though I like the Brocks on those, the Batubos function better. So we would that's what we would recommend in this particular situation. We've got our Brock's Performance carbon fiber shift linkage there. No such thing as making one of these things too light. That's one of the things about Harleys. Why do they have to be so heavy? Does anybody know? Doesn't make any sense to me. Let me tell you about this bike when it comes to riding it. Now, it's a stock motor. We're not going to mess with getting into the motor. We just want it to start and go. But the thing I like about this bike is, unlike most Dynas, it starts, it goes, it turns, but man, does this thing stop. And one of the things that's really nice, not only do we have Hayabusa brakes front and rear, but the Hayabusa forks were designed for a 500-pound motorcycle that goes 200 miles an hour. They're extremely rigid. So jump on your Dyna next chance you get, or really any Harley, take your handlebars and go like that, and you can feel the oscillation, especially if you have the stock Harley forks, and they're just terrible. These things are so rigid. This bike, it is hands down the best handling Harley Davidson I've ever been on. I've got a Buell. The Buell probably handles as well, but it's got Harley brakes. It doesn't stop. This thing stops on a dime. It's absolutely a joy to ride. It is a bunch of fun. Does it have yank your arms out of the socket horsepower? No. And I got 20 other bikes that do. I'll ride those when I want to go fast. This is a really, really, really cool bike to ride. I like it a lot. Anyway, like I said, we got the T-bars. We got various other things. Let's go ahead and get into the tech talk portion of this video. All right, for the tech talk portion of this, why are we here? Well, one of the things that we'll do around here is we'll let the employees ride this bike around. And one of the employees was riding it around. He brought it in here one day, parked it right over here. I got a text message to my phone, because I'm all the way at the other side of the building, you know, hey, Mr. Davidson, there's something wrong with the Dyna. Can you come out in the parking lot and look at it? Well, I come outside, and this thing's got a puddle of fuel about that big. And I'm like, what's going on? He's like, when I start the bike, it starts and idles, but it idles real rough, and then it starts leaking gas out of the bottom of the filter. And he's like, the only way I can get it to stop is to turn the fuel off, but then the bike won't run. He's like, what should I do? So, figure it out. And I walked off. Well, I walked off for several months and he wasn't able to figure it out. Well, one of the reasons that I found out after the fact, when I decided to just go ahead and bring it to my shop at home, we're crazy busy here, so I brought it there once I got a chance to mess with it, I started looking up Harley CV carburetor leaking from air filter. And I got all this rigmarole, nothing that really said what was going on. And don't get me wrong, I knew what was going on. I just wanted to see if it had been addressed and see if there's any idiosyncrasies with the Harley versus, which is also a Keihin carburetor, versus the Mikunis and the other ones that I fixed in my life that were doing the same thing. I wasn't able to find hardly any information when I did an internet search in the forums. I found the problem in the forums, but I didn't find any cure. Now, granted, I didn't spend a day looking for this stuff. I'm like, all right, well, I know what's wrong with it. Got to be one of several things. I'll just fix it. And the only thing I had, I was home by myself. I didn't have anything except my phone. So the footage you're going to see is really close up, how to do it footage of me fixing the problem of the gas leaking out of this carburetor. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get into that video for the guys that are going, man, my bike's leaking. I just want to see how to fix it. Would you stop talking now? So we'll give you that now. Going to talk about the proper operation of a vacuum petcock. It has different settings. We've got on, off, and reserve. Now, how do you test to make sure a vacuum petcock works? It works off of, as you would guess it, vacuum. When your engine is running, it creates a vacuum in this tube, which comes over here and draws on the diaphragm. I'm going to go ahead and pull that off real quick because we're going to simulate its operation. And all I'm going to do is put a hose right back where that line was. All right, so now we've got a hose there. Here's the end of the hose. Now, I've already loosened this to show you what's going on. I got a little rag down here to catch any gasoline, and I got gloves to keep gasoline off my fingers. So we pull this off, and we're on off. Nothing comes out. Turn it on. Nothing comes out. Put it to reserve. Nothing comes out. That is correct. It's not supposed to come out. Engine's not running. You don't have a vacuum. I'm going to put it on off. And this is going to be a little difficult to do. Basically what we've got to do is try and catch the gas here, if we have any. I now have that tube in my mouth, and on off, I'm just going to suck on it. Nothing. All right, now I've turned it to on, and I'm going to just put a little bit of vacuum on this. Watch this. Little vacuum. See that? I can control the amount going in. So when your engine is running, that's what's happening. You're getting a constant vacuum. Let me get this out of my mouth. You're getting a constant vacuum, so you're getting gasoline to your carburetor. Now, I'm going to put it on reserve. If I have enough fuel in the tank and I draw on it, there we go. If I didn't have enough, there's basically just a, for lack of a better argument, there's just a tube that goes up to metal tube. So above the tube is your normal gasoline level. Once the gas drops down to the end of the tube, when you put it on reserve, then it starts drawing from here at the bottom. So you can get that extra fuel to get to your gas station. So anyway, why am I showing you this? I'm going to put this back on. I wanted to make sure that my petcock worked properly. Now, I'm going to come over here to this side of the bike, and I'm going to show you something. And again, put a rag down here. I'm going to simulate fuel going into the engine. I'm drawing on my vacuum right now. All right. Do you see all the gas coming out? It's dumping out everywhere. So when I start the bike, it's dumping fuel everywhere. Where's it coming from? Basically everywhere. What that means is I have a float level problem. So I'm going to go in and adjust the float and make sure that we don't still have this problem. I'll show you that here in a minute. First thing we're going to have to do is remove the carburetor from the intake manifold. In order to do that, we've got this intake backing plate, nice little piece from S&S. We're just going to remove these screws, and we're also going to remove these screws. And watch, there are some plastic washers here because oil can flow from the head. It's like a little overflow deal, goes back into the engine for emissions. So I'm going to do that right now. I have to set the phone down to do it, but you'll get the idea. Just pull it apart. All right, we're going to go ahead and pull this off. I got this sort of setting here. You can see the little washer. There's also another one on this side. Basically, you've got a washer on either side. This is a drilled banjo bolt to allow oil to flow. Let's go ahead and just set this out of the way. Now we have our carb sitting there. It's level like it would be. We've got the bike leveled in our stand. Now I'm just going to go ahead and take the tube one more time, draw on it, and see if we can figure out exactly where the fuel is coming from. It looks like, man, a little there. Let's see what we've got. It's coming out right there. So where is that? It's very difficult to see. Let's try it again. All right, it's coming out of this, which is the pilot air hole. I'll pull the carburetor apart here in a second and show you why gasoline should not be coming out of that. What we basically have here, we're going to have, my guess is one of two things. We're either going to have an improper fuel level, which doesn't just happen, although it can. You can go over a bump and these old carburetors will start acting up. Or we may have debris between the needle and seat of the carburetor, or possibly the needle valve is worn out, or the seat's worn out, and we'll talk about what happens depending on what you have there. First, we're going to try float level though. We'll be right back. All right, guys, I'm going to try to leave this carburetor on so we can see the float level on the bike. One thing I want to mention, it's a really good practice. The little Phillips head screws that they put in these things are terrible. Your chances of unscrewing them on the bike or on the side of the road are very poor. If you ever maintain your carburetor, which you're going to have to, the pilot jets on these things clog up all the time, so you've got to clear those out. But one of the things I do, I just go to a hardware store and get a metric socket head cap screw. I like stainless steel so they don't corrode. Makes it a lot easier to get these screws out, even from the back. And I'm not going to tell you what size and pitch and so forth. Just go to the damn hardware store and have some, with one of your old screws, and they'll help you find what you need. At least ours will. All right, pull that off. Oops. That's why we put a little rag down there to catch things. Try and get this rear one, which you are never, ever, ever going to get with a Phillips head screwdriver on the side of the road for sure. All right, I'm going to set this down, bust that loose real quick. All right, guys, so you know, I was just unloosening that back screw, and watch this. Look at all that fuel. That means that the fuel level is up above the surface of the gasket for it to pour out like that, which is 100% incorrect. So we know there's getting too much fuel in the float bowl. It's got to go somewhere, so it's coming up through this hole, which ordinarily would supply air to the pilot air system so the bike can idle correctly. But there's so much fuel in here that it's just running out of that hole, and that's what's causing the fuel to come out of our air cleaner when the bike's running. Okay, before I pull the last screw out, I want to point out over here is your accelerator pump. There's a little tube and a rod. So when I take out this last screw, all I'm going to do is go straight down, just drop the bowl straight down. I'm going to set the phone down for a second. All right. All four screws are out. Got a little rag here because we know we're going to spill some. I'm just going to try and drop this float bowl straight down best I can. Yeah, okay. Well, the float bowl is not, or the float level isn't as high as I suspected. It could have just been because it cocked sideways. So what we're going to do here, you can look and see too. See all that debris down in there, that gunk? I'm gonna dump this out. I want to try and show you. There's just all kinds of goo in there. See how I moved it around? If any of that stuff gets up into the needle and seat of your needle valve, it'll hold it open and cause this problem. So we're gonna go ahead and dump this out. And you can still see. Sorry, I don't have a videographer with me today, but all that stuff. I know what it is. When we powder coated the tank, some of the media to blast the tank got inside the tank, and we've tried to clean it out. We've done the best we can, but the stuff's pretty much impossible to get it all out. We tried kerosene with nuts and bolts in the tank, shaking it around, all the old tricks. We still have some. It's not the end of the world, but like I said, it could be causing the problem we have here. Now, let's go in and look at what we have left. So here is the float. This little deal here. Give me a pointer. This is the float. Why do they call it a float? Well, because it floats in the gasoline. When there's no gas in the float bowl, it's down like this. When the gasoline comes up, it floats, it floats, it floats. And then let me see if I can get a nice shot over here. When the float comes up, that valve goes up and stops the gas flow. The gas is coming in through, it's really hard to see, but it's coming in through here, and the needle valve is right on the back side of that. It's silver. It's a little silver thing in the middle of your picture. And what you can see, this whole metal piece should be coming out further than it is. It's just sort of funny. There we go. Now, see how the whole piece is moving around now? Now it's sort of stuck. Well, I don't like that. I think we've got some goo in there. All right, I'll show you how to get that out here in a second. Okay, before we get into looking at what's going on with the needle and seat, I want to show you how this is supposed to work in the real world. I've got my little container here to catch any overflow. I'm gonna put my vacuum tube in my mouth, and then as I think about it this way, the float bowl is here, it's sealed, so the gasoline is going to enter the float bowl, raise up, and the float is going to float up until the point where the gas doesn't flow anymore. Let me show you what happens in our scenario though. I draw on it. Okay, that's normal. All right, here's where the float bowl would float level would normally be, pretty much level with the gasket surface. And when I draw on it, we should not get any fuel in the bowl, but we do. Now let's just go ahead and cartoonish this and push the float bowl all the way up to where it should never ever be. Draw on our vacuum line and see whether or not the fuel stops flowing to the engine. It does not. It continues to flow even with the float bowl cartoonishly high. That means we've either got something blocking the needle valve, or it's worn out, or whatever. But we're gonna dig into that. So think about it this way, guys. Ordinarily, fuel is coming in. It's filling up the bowl until the float goes here. Once it gets to a certain point, it doesn't fill anymore. But as you're driving your bike, you're drawing gas out of it. That little brass thing in the middle is called the main jet. That, if you're at wide open throttle, that's where it's drawing its fuel from. Well, as it draws its fuel, the level goes down, so the float goes down, so we get more fuel filling up the bowl. And this is just a balancing act back and forth. It works flawlessly when everything is working correctly. It's a very simple design, but when everything isn't working correctly, then you have a problem. Let's see whether or not we can pull this float out, see what's going on with this needle, and see whether or not it's even possible to stop the fuel flow with the valve. All right, so this next part may be a pain for you. Like I said, we have worked on this carburetor before. It's been cleaned before, which means it's come apart before. Now, the way this is held in, there's a little rod here, a little rod that goes all the way through from here. You've got to get that rod out, and some of them are hell. You may have to pull your carburetor completely off, put it on a bench, maybe even put it in a vise, and take a punch and punch that out. I'm going to try and cheat this real quick because this has been apart before, and I'm going to take a spring punch, and I'm just going to see. All right, see what we got going on here? See how see how this pin is starting to come out? There we go. The pin is sort of really hard to do and hold the camera. There it is. Now, what you can do from there, I'm gonna go try to get a little punch. You can take side cutters, and so long as you're careful not to damage the rods. Sometimes these rods are pressed in there so tightly, it's really hard to get them out. You've got to draw them out. But if I could take this side cutter here and sort of pry on it, no, and all I'm doing, it's not coming out, and all I'm doing is boogering up the outside of the bar. So I'm gonna go get me a little punch and punch this thing through. Hold on. Okay, so what I have here is a punch that is a smaller diameter than the hole. All right, I'm gonna see if I can just drive that pin out. Oh, wow, look at that. Popped it right out. And now, all right, I'm gonna go ahead and this is the pin that holds everything together. Pull it out. All right, set it down here with the rest of our parts. And now, if I pull this out, of course, the float's gonna fall. I'm gonna hold it up there. Pull the pin. I noticed a shortage of stuff like this on YouTube, so I thought I would put it up. Okay, now the pin's out. The float's gonna drop down, and let's see what we've got. That is the needle there. Okay, let's pull everything out. So basically what you have here is this little deal. This little deal right here has a rubber tip on it, and that rubber tip is what goes up and seals inside of a taper. It goes up in there. So the question is, and I can't really see right now, especially with the carburetor, but is there something wrong with that? Meaning, is there debris that has floated up in there and got everything jammed up? Doesn't look like it. Looks pretty good up there. All right, so then let's go ahead and inspect this piece. I'm gonna show you, this is really difficult to see. Basically all there is, there's a little tab right here at the top and a little spring. That needle just sits over top of that tab. So if I tweak it down like that, you can see, okay, there we go. Now, that's all that holds it. That little piece of metal holds it on top of the tab. This piece, this is the part that does the sealing. It's rubber, goes up into that brass. This is the part that gets pushed. There's like a little spring inside of here. So you got a little bit of play when this tab from the float pushes on it, moves everything up, and that's what's supposed to seal it. The whole thing moving up. I'm gonna pull this little spring tab off. You can see it's a crazy small little deal here, there. Right? And then there's a little spring here. Basically the whole thing goes up like this. Now if we inspect this, you can see that actually looks real good. If it's got any nicks in it or tears or just worn out, that'll cause it to leak. So my worry is we've got some other problem possibly with this brass section of the carburetor, which can wear out. I'm going to test that here real quickly. I'll be right back. All right. So basically what we're going to do here, I'm going to install this up where it goes. And you can see my thumbnail is basically, let's see if I can get that to focus. Yeah, it's one of those days. Hold on. All right. So what we're going to do, I'm going to push this all the way in and suck on the hose, and if gas comes out, we got a problem. Okay, gas is not coming out. That means if I pull it down just a little, with drawing on the tube, gas should come out. There we go. So we know this has the ability to properly stop the flow of gas into this engine. So what has happened, for whatever reason, this isn't being shoved up far enough to make that seal. We're gonna do that by adjusting the float so that the float doesn't have to come up as high to press this needle firmly up into its seat. The way we're gonna do that is adjust that little metal tab right there. And when I say adjust, I mean bend. It's really that simple. I'm going to bend it up so that it shoves this needle up further into the carburetor to shut off the flow of gas. I'll show you how to do that here in a second. Okay, I just reinstalled our half moon metal clip. Now, boy, I wish I had a cameraman. Basically what happens here, and it doesn't matter, the orientation of this doesn't matter, but all I'm gonna do is slip this over top of this tab, and you can see that tab moving is what pushes this up and down. So here to start off with, before I even put the float back in, I'm just gonna bend this tab up so that I know it's going to move that valve up further into the carburetor to try and stop this leak. It really is as simple as taking whatever. All right, you can see I bent that up quite a bit. I want to make sure this thing shuts off. We'll adjust the fine tuning later. All right, guys, remember when I took the little side cutters, or dikes as they're affectionately known? See that little booger? When I put this pin in, that little booger is going in here in this plastic part and preventing the slide from moving freely. So I'm just going to file that down and remind myself not to do that again. Bonehead shit. All right, I just took this little ignition file, filed that smooth. Now I'm just going to take some sandpaper to it just to make sure that it's got a nice smooth surface finish, because as I mentioned, this plastic part is going to rotate on it as the float moves, so we don't want anything slowing that down or impeding it. All right, little fine grit sandpaper and WD-40 did a really nice job of smoothing this rod back up. I'm going to go ahead and tap it back in and see how it works. All right, so I cleaned up my pin. I'm going to try to make sure that it's nice and smooth now. If I would have botched it completely, I could just go buy a drill bit, the correct size. This just happens to mic out the same as a number 41 drill bit. Chop it off here and make my own pin. But you also have to worry about the numbers. You may have to smooth those off. Anyway, we didn't do that. We fixed our pin. So the first thing we're going to check is to make sure that the float moves without binding. Come on. All right. It cannot stick at all. If it sticks at all, you'll have the same problem going down the road. So now look, no stick. No matter what I do, I can't force it to stick. So one of the things I've been doing here is adjusting the tab, and this is really difficult to see, so I'll do the best I can. This rubber tip, like we talked about, goes up and seals up inside of this hole, and the whole piece moves up and down. What I adjusted the tab to do was, when this part goes all the way up and stops, I want my float to be absolutely perpendicular to this line. Now, because there's a little spring-loaded deal here on the tab, right there, see, hopefully you can see that, that will allow this to over-travel some, but that just basically gives it a little bit of cushion so that the valve isn't going up and down as you're driving down the road. So anyway, I'm just going to stick this in here. It's got a little tab. Slide that back. Very, very simple mechanism. All right, I'm just going to hold it, put it up in there, go ahead and put my pin in, and all you had to do is just bend that little tab a little bit at a time. Oops. Hey Brock, if you put it in the correct orientation, it's going to work a lot better. Huh. So this little tab, I just took this, bent it up a little or down a little, whatever needs to happen for it to seat correctly and be parallel. All right, let's try this again. Okay. All right, I'll try and grab a flashlight here. And if you can see right here, that's the valve. When I push it up, there it is. And you can see I'm as close to parallel with the float bowl line as I can get, and it does over travel some. Now, just real quick, I'm going to double check to make sure that it's closing. All right, I'm drawing a vacuum. You can see no gas flow. As soon as it drops a little, there we go. And you can see no matter where it is up in here, it's still not allowing fuel out, which is perfect. That's exactly what we want. So now all I need to do, put the float bowl back on. Occasionally the accelerator pump rod will fall out. Super simple. It just goes inside, sort of backwards there. Don't worry about the boot for now. I cleaned all the gunk out of here. Now all we're going to do is line up the accelerator rod, and then the nozzle for the accelerator pump goes up through the carburetor. All right, that's it. Put our screws back in, and then we'll test to see whether or not we're still leaking fuel out of here. All right, put the float bowl screws back in. I pulled the little boot down so that it seals up nice. Now I'm going to actually actuate the throttle, and I want you to watch here. We don't have any fuel in the float bowls. Up a little bit, little residual in there, but watch what happens when I draw on the valve. Now we're filling up the float bowl. All right, that should be enough. Now we'll try the throttle. Oh yeah, look at that. So we know we have fuel in the float bowl. The accelerator pump's functioning correctly. I'm going to put the intake plate back on, and we'll fire this thing up to see if it's still leaking. All right, I have my backing plate back on. The gaskets are on either side of the bolts like we talked about. One thing I should mention while we're looking in here, this is a constant velocity carburetor, which means that air lifts up on the slide. You should always, whenever you can see the slide, just check it. It should go all the way up, and you hear that sound. You should always hear that whoosh, for lack of a better term, and the slide should fall at a controlled rate. It shouldn't just spring down. There is a big spring in there, but the vacuum helps hold this down so it's a little bit smoother. All right, so let's go back over here real quick, and let's go ahead and take off our hose that we had put on. We don't need that anymore. Put the stock vacuum hose back on the petcock. Now, I want to mention something. Whenever a problem like this happens and it dumps fuel into your air cleaner, some of that fuel is going to get sucked up in the engine, and this bike was running terribly before we decided to take it apart and fix this. I went ahead and pulled the old plugs out and put in the hardware store, or local auto parts store, had some E3s. Are they better? Hell, I don't know, but they put money into the NHRA, which means I like them. All right, we are on. This bike typically starts fine without the choke. So let's come over here. We'll give it a couple squirts. Now, last time this bike started, it was gushing gas out of here. It was also gushing some out of the overflow up here. There was just a whole bunch of gas flying out of it when it was idling. Let's see whether or not we've cured this problem. Clear prop. I always give it, when it's cold, give it a couple squirts with the accelerator pump. Boop, boop. All right, and then hit the gas and hope for the best. Oh, look at that. Purring like the proverbial kitten. Much nicer. All right, so the only thing we have left to do is clean up our filter before we put it on. Now, most of the Harley world doesn't really know about sprint filters, but one of the things that's real nice, instead of having to take another hour out of my day cleaning a filter and then waiting for it to dry, with sprint filter, I got to set my phone down again. Hold on. With the sprint filter, all I need to do, there's some bugs, some gook. I'm just going to take and hit it with compressed air. All right. Got it cleaned up real nice. And sprint filters don't require any oil of any sort. They work without it. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on and then go for a ride, make sure everything runs good. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I noticed there was a lack of this information when I searched YouTube, so I thought I'd put the time into showing. I knew how to fix it, but I was wondering if there were any caveats with the Harley carb. I've fixed this on lots of other dirt bike carbs and other things in the past. So anyway, until next time, I'm Brock from Brock's Performance. Shameless plug for Sprint Filter. Thanks for having a great filter. And I'm going to go for a ride. See ya. All right, so on my bike lift, the bike fired up, idled real nice. Everything was great. I went ahead and took it for about a 20-25 mile ride. No more gas leaking out of the carburetor. And now, if you don't mind, internet police, F off. I know that's not how they do it in the manual. I got ahead and I can think for myself. I showed you the way that I do it, and I've done it for years. If you want to do it by the book, follow the manual, have fun. I will give you some advice. Buy extra screws, because you will have that carburetor on and off so many times that you will wear your screws and screwdriver out. If you do it the way I showed you, it's very simple. Here, it's not working. Gas dripping everywhere. Here, everything works fine. Everything works perfectly. And you know, we started with a vacuum petcock. I know that was a little strange to come right in on it, but if the petcock is leaking, it's just going to make this problem worse. It can act on some carbs, it can make the problem occur. So we went for the petcock, we figured out what was going on. I went ahead and showed my bonehead move, messing up the rod, just because 9 out of 10 of you were gonna do that too, and I thought it'd be nice to show you how to fix it. So anyway, it purred like a kitten. I came here, grabbed my trusty cameraman, thank you Corey, and one of the things, after my 20-mile ride, when I got here, the bike was idling really high. Well, we've got beautiful weather now. It's usually ridden in the summertime. And when you clean all the gook and crap out of your carburetor, don't be surprised if you have to adjust your idle. I turn the idle down. Now, I'm a big fan of the Harley potato idle. Let's see if we got it. Also let you hear what this Trask exhaust sound like. Alright, so with all these cool looks, all these cool sounds, and now with functionality, quite frankly, you can't get out of a stock Harley Davidson for any price. Would you be surprised to know that the whole idea behind this initially was a budget build? You can find an 05 Dyna, well, pre-COVID, you could find them really, really cheap. When we figured out all the pricing, now granted, we're not including our labor, some of the products were donated, some of them we already had, but when it was all said and done, including the cost of the bike, this bike costs less than $10,000 to build. Now, who wouldn't ride this cool ass motorcycle if they could get it for 10 grand? And the secret, we have most of the parts to make it easy for you to use economical wheels and forks and brakes off of eBay, or from a salvage yard or wherever. You don't have to buy that super expensive stuff to get really, really good performance. Those brakes are designed to stop a 200-mile-an-hour motorcycle. This thing will stop on a dime. It's actually a little scary, because if you're used to riding Harleys, you know that that's not what they do. I'm not bad mouth. I love my Harleys. You just have to understand what they can do well and what they can't. And then the other thing, and I really can't emphasize this enough, this bike is tight. It is tight. If I do this to any of my other Harleys, they keep resonating for a second or two afterwards. This thing is tight. You take it out, like we took it out to Sturgis, and I went down Spearfish Canyon Road, and man, the thing just carves up the corners. It's just so nice to ride. Even though it doesn't have a, sorry, I'm so good with these Dyna kickstands. Even though it doesn't have arm straightening power, if you want to go ahead and get into the engine, go for it. One of the things that's really nice about this too, if I wanted to put on, let's say, the coolest wheels in the world, BST carbon fiber wheels, what would I put on it? That's pretty simple, isn't it? It's got Gen 1 ZX14 wheels on it right now. I would buy Gen 1 ZX14 wheels, unbolt these, bolt those back on. You could do the same thing. You'd have to run a spacer for the rotors if you want to run the ZX14 version. But if you just go ahead and buy a ZX14 rear, Diamond Tech, Rapid Tech would be really badass on this, and a Busa front, boom, boom, done. Bolt them right on. Now you're getting a little out of your budget build there, but seriously, if you can put a set of BSTs on it, it's going to do all the things I was just telling you about, except it's going to do them better, much, much better. Quicker turning, better steering, quicker acceleration, everything better. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Well, what do they call that? Philanthropy. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I want you to know about our parts so you can buy them. But when it comes to all that crap I had to do on that carburetor, it's to help guys out if they're having problems. I hope you appreciate it. I'm Brock from Brock's Performance. This was a Tech Talk. Until next time, we'll see you then.